I was there 8 years. I made the decision that Washington's broken. It's so broken that it can't be fixed, so we better get back to the states and fix the states. So I left Washington and said, I'm going to run for governor. And the best example I can give you about the state of Ohio is very similar. Ohio, about 52 or 53% of what Ohio spends today is Medicaid dollars, federally funded Medicaid dollars. So think about that. When the federal government doesn't have any more money to pay for their federally funded Medicaid system that they're paying Ohio for now, it'll be a domino effect. So what I said is I want to go back to Ohio and fix. I truly believe that we got to get back to the points where the states are strong enough to withstand, the economy on their own without the federal government, which, by the way, was the way it was several hundred years ago. I mean, states were strong enough to survive, and the federal government was just put together really as, for interstate commerce, for the post office, for transportation. Those were the reasons. Today, the federal government has become the overwhelming necessity for some states to survive, and we got to change that. So I believe that we got to go back, and I say that in my book. States have to become stronger, and I said I'm going to run for governor, and I'm going to do what I can to get Ohio stronger, because the day of reckoning will come for Ohio too. And I said that, and I still think we're the day of reckoning. Look, we're now going through coronavirus. Next year, you watch how hard Ohio struggles, because Ohio is dependent on federal dollars. So if you're a state dependent on federal dollars and the federal government at some point in time starts to ratchet it back, Ohio will be in a really bad position. The problem with states, and many states like Ohio, is the politicians only look to the next election, not 10 and 20 years down the road. See, when I ran for mayor, why I was successful is I built a 10-year plan. I built a 10, 15-year plan. Ohio today is building plans based on 2 years and 4 years. Not going to be helpful, and that's why people are leaving. Our taxes are too high, and I talk about that in a book. We have a situation in Ohio that we're so dependent on federal dollars that Ohio will have a collapsing situation at some time, maybe 10, 15, 20 years from now, maybe 5 years from now. Nobody knows when the day of reckoning is.
Are there any states in this union that are running a surplus where they wouldn't have to rely on government dollars?
South Dakota, the governor of South Dakota, Kristi Noem, was just in Ohio. She's a personal friend of mine. She's running a surplus. I mean, and she's running a surplus in coronavirus time.
So how do you do that? What's some of her platforms?
She kept the state open. She gave the authority to the people. She didn't take it away. She has an interesting story, because she said when the coronavirus hit, she brought in the health department and they said, hey, we got a problem here. She brought in our hospital systems and said, hey, we got a problem here. And she brought her attorneys in. And the attorney said, yeah, you may have a problem, but one thing, you can't violate the Constitution. You can't tell a business that it's essential or not essential. You can't tell an individual he or she has to wear a mask. You can't tell an individual that they have to stay home. You can't tell a business that they have to close at 10 o'clock. Those are unconstitutional acts of the federal government and the state government. So she evaluated everything and said, I'm going to leave it up to the businesses and the people. And what she will tell you is, yes, she has coronavirus there, but her state has a surplus. Businesses want to come and grow there. She has to build her economic department because people want to be able to put a business in a state like that. So there are some of the answers. We got to give the authority back to the people, which is why the United States was formed, 200 plus years ago. It was about, being tired of the government, England, telling us what to do. And now we have state government telling us what to do. I mean, and that's a problem. So I think the answer really exists is you got to have your economics growing. Going back to the city, when people say, how did you balance the budget, make the city of Wadsworth successful? I grew the economy, didn't raise taxes, I got businesses to want to come there. I went to our planning department and they'd say, well, you don't understand. I go, I'm going to tell you, what you don't understand is we need this revenue and we need to be able to get them into the city in a reasonable fashion. Yes, they have to follow some regulations, but we don't need to make it so hard that they don't want to come here. And that's what we did. We opened it up to business, and then the city became stronger. It's the same thing we're going to have to do in local government, state government, and we got to get the government off our back. So it gets right back to the question, why did I leave Washington? Because Washington's broken. And until somebody realizes that, I don't think we're going to fix it. Now, if you know in my book, I spent one whole chapter on how to fix it.
Yeah, lay down some laws for us. What would you do?
Well, term limits.
If you could snap your fingers.
Term limits. You got to put term limits in. People cannot have that much power. And it's interesting because people say, well, we have term limits called voting. You can vote somebody out every time. It doesn't happen because if you're there long enough, you have the name ID and you have the money to basically squash anybody who tries to.
The war chest.
Right. Yeah. So you can't do it that way. The other thing is just get back to regular order. If you're at regular order, and I talk about this in a book, regular order is Jim Renacci is a legislator on the Ways and Means Committee. I come up with a bill. I go get, the Ways and Means Committee had 34 people. I get 19 people to support it. It passes, and then I get you need 218 on the House side. I get 200, and I move it through. It's the way that you hear in the books.
Right.
This is the way legislation works. So let's give that back. When it comes to finances, we got to break the money in politics. Now, you can't take money away from politics
because it's a free speech thing,
right?
In a way, like when I give my money to a campaign, that's one way of me expressing my
right. But here's the problem: it's not just you giving money.
Right.
It's now bundled, and you got to have more transparency. But here's the other problem: without the money, you can't beat the incumbent. So if you take the incumbent away by having term limits and you scale the money back, now you can have a system that works. And I think those are some of the things we need to do. And just regular order. I mean, term limits will help dramatically because it'll, and people say, well, if you have term limits, the problem is there's this intrinsic value you have by being there for 10 years. No, there's not.
Yeah.
Because I was there for 10 years and it didn't matter. It didn't matter because who really writes the bills? I mean, bills today are written by staffers in some dark room that come up with all this stuff and listen to all the lobbyists and then they put a bill together. And then they roll a 2,000-page bill out and say, hey, you got to vote for it. So I don't care whether you got 15 years or 20 years, you're still going to get that bill. So the truth of it is regular order will fix that. Term limits will fix the problem with having the same old people there. Money in politics will change it. There are a number of ways we can do it.
Now, the tricky part is how do you instantiate term limits doesn't the House have to shoot itself in the foot and pass that bill to reduce their own limits?
Well, the states could do it.
Okay.
You could change constitutions. You got to get the states to step up, which is another way. Yes, the House could do it and the Senate could do it, but they're not.
That
right? They're not going to shoot
unlikely.
themselves in the foot. But you could put the power back. You don't want to have a constitutional convention. You hear people say we should have a constitutional convention where every state gets together. Now, what you should do is constitutional amendments and get the state to ratify constitutional amendments. Then it's not a haphazard. Because guess what happens in Constitution Convention? That means you bring all the states together. What do you think will follow? All the money will follow, and then all the special interests will follow, and they'll go in that room, and it'll all be decided by, money instead of true values and principles. That's why I do believe constitutional amendments, I talk about that, is a better way of doing it.